for joining us for today's webinar. We are very excited to have you here. Today we have a special webinar where we're bringing back our Q&A with CaFÉ. Thanks to everyone who submitted your questions. We have plenty to go over today. Based on the questions we received, the key items that we'll cover include logging in with multi-factor authentication, adding multiple administrators, viewing records of sent emails, downloading artwork images, demographic data and promotional e-blast, and upcoming new features to CaFÉ. All right, let's go ahead and dive right into our first question that was submitted. The question we received is, how does the multi-factor authentication step work when you log in and why was it added? This is a great question, especially since it's a relatively new thing to CaFÉ. So if you haven't logged into CaFÉ for a while or aren't familiar, back in November, we introduced multi-factor authentication to our login. Multi-factor authentication, it's also referred to as MFA, means that when you log in, you're not just using your username and password. While your password is one layer of protection, we all know the risks of passwords being compromised. And for those organizations who share passwords across the team, that risk only gets higher. So with MFA, and I'll show you how it works in a minute, once you enter your password, you are then required to enter a one-time code that is delivered to you and you only. This ensures the only one who is set up with the account can log in. So as for why we did this, MFA provides an extra layer of security to your CaFÉ account. This feature also keeps CaFÉ compliant with security standards and is likely something you'll see or you have been seeing implemented across the internet. On to how it works, let me go to CaFÉ here, and I'll head to our MFA options page. So if you haven't logged into CaFÉ since about early November, the first time you log back in, you'll be greeted with this exact multi-factor authentication page. You'll see these three options listed, and you'll notice but when you first log in, if you haven't in a while, you'll notice that you can't go to any of the other tabs or pages until you've chosen your MFA option here. So the first option is email. So this will email a one-time passcode that you'll then enter after you enter your password. And the second option is to use an authenticator app. This option means that when you log into CaFÉ, instead of getting an email sent to you to have that one-time code, you can instead use an app that has the code on your phone. So you can use any authenticator apps that exist nowadays: Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, LastPass, Duo, there's tons of them. This option isn't as commonly used, but it's actually something that I really highly recommend, especially if you log into CaFÉ often. That's because instead of waiting for a one-time passcode to be delivered via email, which can often take a couple of minutes, the Authenticator app on your phone will always have a one-time code available to you. That code just essentially lives in your phone app and then refreshes and creates a new one every 60 seconds or so to stay secure. But every time you go there, there's a code readily available. Let me quickly show you how to actually use the MFA code. So I'll go ahead and log out here. On the login page, as you're used to, you'll enter your username and your passcode. Click login. Then you'll be prompted to enter your multi-factor authentication code. If you selected email as your option, you'll now want to go to check your email that your code was sent to. It'll be the email that is associated with your admin account. And then if you are using a phone app like I am, you'll want to check that on your phone and then enter that into the code into the field here. So once you enter the code, you're logged in, and that's it. Like I said, I highly recommend the phone app. It's something, because a lot of sites across the internet are requiring it nowadays, it's something easy to have. I actually have a desktop version. So, instead of using my own phone for that, I can have it on my computer. You can kind of look up a desktop authenticator app and use that too. I find that very handy. The final option you have for multi-factor authentication is to simply disable it. If you choose this option, you'll be reminded in 2 weeks if you want to enable it again. Now, disabling it may sound like an attractive option, especially if you're not used to MFA. And while it's totally fine if you don't want to use it right now, it's important to know that while MFA is optional for CaFÉ administrators right now, it's going to be a requirement in the future, just to make sure everyone's secure. So I recommend enabling it now so that your account has this extra layer of security and so that you get used to it. So when it does become a requirement, you're already used to using it. As most of you might be aware, this is enabled for administrators like yourself and jurors. And then us CaFÉ staff, this is actually a requirement. We don't have the option to disable it. It's a requirement that all staff using the back end of CaFÉ use it. And then right now, it's not enabled for artists, but that might be something we introduce in the future. But we're taking baby steps to add this extra layer of security. The last thing I'll mention is, if you're ever logged into CaFÉ and you want to change the MFA option that you had selected when you first logged in, or if you ever want to update it, you can go to this little icon on the top right, this little account icon here, and click on Profile. Right now, this is the page we're on, multi-factor authentication. It's the only kind of option you have under your profile settings at this time. So that's all you'll see. And you can come here and just change which option you want to have. You can also, maybe disable it for a couple of weeks so that if you're actively working in CaFÉ and editing your call, you can have it disabled so that when you log back in, it's easier every time. But like I said, it might be required in the future. So just be aware of that. Our next question submitted to us: can you have multiple administrators, not jurors, for specific calls? I think this one comes from Virginia at Irvine Fine Arts Center. Thank you for this question. This is a great question because I know some organizations host different types of calls or events throughout the year and may have different staff members or volunteers who only need access to specific calls. That said, I don't want to disappoint, but unfortunately, we don't have currently an option to assign administrators to different calls. So for anyone who doesn't know, each organization is able to have up to 5 different administrators with access to the administrator side of CaFÉ. So this allows multiple people the ability to log on to CaFÉ and edit new calls, access applications, anything else like that. And like I said, this new step of verifying your identity with the multi-factor authentication, it's important that anyone who does need access get their own login credentials. But back to this question, though, anyone with administrator login credentials will be able to access all of the calls that you have listed, both archived and current. As you've seen on the login page, you have full access as an administrator to the events tab where you can see all of the calls that are currently available and the ones that are archived, the jury stages for each of these calls where you can access, all that information. But unfortunately, at this time, we don't have the availability to assign access for administrators just to specific calls. Anyone with an administrator access has access to everything. So, that might be something that we change in the future. And this is obviously separate from jurors where, specific juror accounts that you set up, those only have access to those specific calls that you want to assign them to. But right now, for administrators, it's kind of a blanket access to everything. What you can do, though, and one solution I'd offer would be that even if you do have multiple administrators in and out for different calls, you could have us set up an account for one administrator to have access. And then as soon as they're done with the call or doing anything that they need to do, you can then contact us to have us disable their login. It's easy enough for us to do. So, we can disable it. Once you maybe need to give them access again, or, the next year comes around and the same person needs access, we can go in and reactivate the account if you change your mind or anything like that. So that's one way that you can kind of control who has access to your CaFÉ account. For anyone who's listening and is thinking, oh, I didn't know we could have multiple administrators. Yes, you definitely can have up to 5. So if you want to add anyone so that they have access and they have their own username and password, you can send us an email or go to this ticket tab and send us a message to let us know that you'd like to add an administrator. All we need is their full name, email address, and phone number. And then a member of our team will just add their account, create a username, and send along those login instructions. Our next question is, would it be possible to save a record of correspondence with artists to prove that emails were sent? The answer to this is not a yes, but it's not a no, and I'll tell you why. So let's go into our events communication page. This is the main place where you send your emails out. So when you send an email to an artist through CaFÉ, as you can see here, if we wanted to send it to our batch of invited or not invited folks, or maybe to everyone if they're all in the received status, the first method of giving a record is to make sure that you yourself are copied on that message. As you can see, when I pull up this emailer form here, not only does it have a space to add a CC or, BC someone, you can enter your own email address. You can enter someone on your team. There's also this option here to make it easy just to send yourself a copy of the first email. So if you check this box here, it'll send you the first copy of the email that goes out, and that will go to the email of the one associated with your login with your admin account here. So even if you skip these fields, once you send your email, clicking send me a copy ensures that you receive that first email that goes out. Just be aware that this option then means when you get that email copy, it would contain one of the artist's name and artwork info, since it really is just a copy of that first one that goes out. But this way you can at least get a copy of it with your message to be assured that the email was sent and have that proof available to save. The other way to check on if an email was sent is to go to the application page to one of the artists. So we'll start in events and then management, and we will open up our call. Once we have these application by statuses, I can go ahead and click on the batch of the artist that I sent that email to. And since in the events communication tool, you're sending it to everyone in that status, I can click on that status and essentially just click on anyone in that status because they were all sent the same email. From here, I'll click on the application ID number. And on this application page, I'll scroll all the way down to the email section. And under emails details, you'll see here, this is a message that was sent prior, and it has the basic, date and timestamp and information. And then I can click on view email to see the message itself. Now, this does contain the date and the time it was sent. But the only thing about this method is that there's not necessarily an option to download this record or export it. What you could do instead is either take a screenshot or capture of your browser page here, or you could, highlight and copy and paste the text itself. So those are the two ways to retrieve a copy of the emails you sent. Unfortunately, we don't yet have one place where you can go to see a list or download all of the emails that you've sent out. But for now, I recommend this process more so of copying yourself on the email that when you send it, but also this step too, so that you can at least be sure it was sent out. But while we're on this topic, though, of emailing, I'll also mention under the Reports tab, you have this option here called the Events Communication Bounce Report. So you can actually run this report for any of the calls, and if you sent an email during a specific time frame, you can enter that window of time. I'll just do with the past year here, and you could do it for all events at once. You could do it for just the call that you're working on, and then click Run Report. And you'll see here, no search results found, no reports found. That's good. That means that none of the emails that I sent out bounced back. If the report does have something listed, you'll be able to see, who it was that didn't get the email and why it bounced and some basic details. And then you can, try to find their info or contact them another way. Just know, though, that even though there's no bounces reported, that doesn't always mean that the emails were received, even though they are delivered. There's always a chance, because of how email works, that some emails are filtered out, some go to spam. So my tips for that are just to keep track of any artists you're waiting to hear back from, and always be sure to include your email in that reply to email address field when sending emails through CaFÉ. I'll quickly show you that again here. When you draft your email, just be sure to include that reply to email address. It should default to have the reply to email be the email that's on your admin account, but especially if you need to change that or override it, or just ensure that everyone who clicks reply to the email that you send, it'll go to you. Otherwise, it'll go to our non-monitored email system, and we won't be able to see any responses. So like I said, the default should already be your email, but I highly recommend adding a reply to email address. Our next question is a common one, and I'm always happy to answer it. The question is, how can I download artist entry images? The simplest answer that's easy to remember is just ask. So to retrieve the images from the artist's entries, all you need to do is submit an image request. You can do this at any stage once your jury's done and you just need your invited artist images, or maybe you want it before your jury so that you have all the images that were received. You can just go to the ticket tab here on the left and send us, fill out the form to send us a message. Under the issue field here, you can choose image request. In your message, just let us know which batch of images you want by listing the status of the applications you need. So for example, let us know that you need all of the images in the invited status or the received status or the waitlist status or something like that. Then let us know if you want the artist names included in the file names of those images. So, this could be helpful if you're still in the jury process and need the images for a blind jury. You can let us know to not include the artist names in the files. Once you submit this form, we'll then send you a link to download a zip file of those high-resolution images. This image request can take up to 24 business hours to complete, but we're often able to get to image requests pretty quickly. So if you do ask for it, in the middle of the work week, in the middle of the day, you're likely will have it that same day. So that's a pretty easy one to answer. Essentially, if you want those images, you can ask us for them. At this time, we don't have the ability to export and send any videos or audio files, even though we hope to add that in the future. But that is what we have so far. And image requests can be very useful for anything you might need, including, creating those virtual exhibitions that we know are pretty popular these days. All right, let's head to our next question. Wondering if you have any demographic or geographic data on all of the artists registered with CaFÉ. So the answer to this question is also a yes and no at the same time. At the moment, we don't have access to demographic data on all artists registered with CaFÉ. Here is where they'll enter in all the information when an artist signs up for CaFÉ, when they create their free account. So with one exception that I'll get to next, for the time being, we do collect the, address for everyone. And that's for, the city, they select the state that they live in, things like that. And that's pretty standard. And as you know, all these contact pieces of information, the name, website, mailing address, all this info becomes automatically attached to their application when they submit it to you. And so that's why we collect this kind of demographic information, and particularly the geographic information. While we only have this available to attach to applications so organizations can see it and review it, we don't collect any other demographic information. Again, though, that's one thing that we hope to add to the future. And maybe within the next year, we will be collecting additional demographic information from artists, and it would be for all artists. As you can imagine, though, we have to make some careful considerations when collecting data in general. So we're currently at a stage of just researching what that might look like for CaFÉ. But like I mentioned before, there is one exception to not being able to pull the geographic info for all the artists registered at once, and that's the promotional e-blast service that we offer to organizations. And I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail in a minute, but with this service, organizations such as yourself can have us send an email that contains info exclusively about your call to a batch of artists. Now, to get that batch of artists, we can customize it in two ways. So the geographic location, that's based on artists' individual states. That's how far narrow we go, is just states. But we can do regions or countries. And then the other piece is the artistic discipline. So as you can see here on the sign up page, the artists they have to select at least one. They can select up to 4 different artistic disciplines. We have these 32 different disciplines at the moment to choose from. So, it runs from the regular painting and drawing categories, sculpture. We also have, more narrow ones like book, paper arts, craft and decorative arts, literary arts. You can see the list here. So when organizations purchase a promotional e-blast, they can choose which location and then which disciplines they want to target. Once we know those 2 things that they want to add, we then pull and run the numbers of how many artists fall into that category or those 2 categories. And then, that would be the number of recipients the email would go to. And the price of the e-blast is based on the number of recipients in those geographic and artistic discipline groups. While that does mean we can pull this kind of geographic and disciplinary demographic information, it really only applies to artists who are opted in to receive those notifications. So, on the bottom of the sign up, we have notification settings where artists can opt into this one, which is the promotional e-blast. So if they opt into it, then they're then added to a list that we can pull that info from. But at this time, we don't currently have data on all of the artists registered that we can pull. So I will go right into our next question because it's very related. And that question is, how do we get additional national coverage for our call? Is it through buying extra ads? Yes, on the topic of promotional e-blasts, if you want to make sure you get your info for your call in front of artists across the country, you might want to consider purchasing promotional ad e-blast. So this page here has information all about this service. And, we can work with you in your budget that you can reach artists in those specific regions, states, or countries. And for those specific disciplines that we talked about, you can pick the ones that are relevant to your call, and we'll work with your budget to come up with a promotional e-blast criteria and target audience. So right now our e-blast start at $100 per almost 10,000 recipients. And we have about 65,000 artists total that are currently opted in to receive e-blasts. So yes, e-blast can be a good way to ensure artists in our system are getting notified about your call. And to learn more about it, you can go to this page. I can show you how to find it from when you're logged in. Essentially, you can log into CaFÉ, go to our help center here, and then under reserve an e-blast, that's how you get to this page here. And then if you want to go forward with purchasing an e-blast, you can click here, reserve my e-blast, fill out a quick form that asks you who you're, hoping to target. And then I will actually be the one that you work with to set up the e-blast details and create the proof. We have a sample proof of what the e-blast looks like once it goes out here. In addition to this e-blast that's available for purchase, we also offer we just have the weekly email that goes out to, again, opted in artists only. That's free for organizations and is automatically something that you're included in. So this is what we're looking at here is our weekly email. It's the Opportunities This Week email, and it's sent every Tuesday, and it contains newly listed opportunities. So these are all the calls with the accepted application date set to the last 7 days. And then it also adds the upcoming deadlines opportunities here, which is the list of calls with deadlines 3 to 15 days out from when that particular Tuesday email is sent. So since you don't have to do anything to be included in this list of calls in those emails, that's at least one other way that CaFÉ helps you get your call in front of registered artists. And then, of course, the other way is just being listed on our main CaFÉ call listings page for any artists that are browsing our website for opportunities to apply to. We have one last question. This question is, what is on the development list for new features? Also, what is on the list for things to change or fix? Top 3 on each. This is a great question. It was submitted by Margaret from the Women's Art Club of Cincinnati. Thank you for submitting that. This is a great question to ask because we're always happy to talk about improvements we're making to the site and new features that we have on tap to be added As you can imagine, adding new features and changing things can be a pretty extensive process that starts right with the feedback that we receive from you. We always are accepting feedback from administrators, jurors, artists, anyone that has it for us. We can accept suggestions via email. We send out a yearly survey where there's typically space for you to give feedback on what you'd like to see from the site. So we definitely do appreciate any and all feedback. Once we have that, we take it from there and consider them all very carefully. We do our research, we discuss it with our team, and we talk about which ones are feasible to be added to our site and which ones have the best impact. So we truly consider each idea, and after that, we work with our developers to make those changes to our platform. So I'll now go into some of the new features and fixes we have planned for this year, as well as some newly implemented ones. So we'll start with some recently implemented changes and features that we've already made. All of these were added within the past 3 months or so. First, we added an option to the field where artists upload their work samples to their portfolio that asks if artists' artwork is up for sale. This has been a very popular request from artists because while there is a price field on the work samples page, and I'll go ahead and just go to the, I'll actually log in as an artist so you can see this. On the portfolio page for artists, this is where they upload their work samples prior to applying to calls. You can go to Upload Media. And this is all the information that's collected for each image they upload. And you can see we've always had this price or value field, but that's not always been the case for artists to have a price or value because it's not always for sale. So now we have this option so that when an artist uploads an image, video, or audio file, they're asked here if their artwork is for sale. If they select yes, this price or value field becomes required, so they have to add the monetary value. But if it's not for sale, they can indicate no, and this price or value field becomes optional. So if they want to include that value in there, they can, but they don't have to. This information then appears with the rest of these artwork details to both you, the administrators, when viewing their applications, as well as to the jurors. So, unless you hide that information from the jurors, everyone can see if the artist indicated if their artwork's for sale or not. So this is a fixed field that is now added there. Can't really be changed from call to call, but gives the artist an opportunity to indicate if it's for sale or not. If you are running a call where you require all artwork to be for sale or something like that, I would recommend including some information or perhaps, a custom question on your application itself regarding that so the artist is aware of that stipulation for your call. But here it at least gives them the ability to add that. All right. Another thing we added was new filter, sort, and search options to the call listings page. So here on the apply to calls page, this is also available under find calls on our main website. This is that call listings page. And we have filter and sort options on the left here. And after finding out what artists truly consider when browsing these new calls, we did add some new things to our search page. In fact, we implemented 9 new ways to sort and filter the calls on this page. And I'll go back here to show you the list of everything. So those new options added are filtering calls by deadline month, including rolling deadlines. Filtering by a selected range of entry fees. So that uses a sliding scale where they can indicate their minimum and maximum entry fee. They can filter by selected range of project budget. So this is more used for public art calls or just any call that has an associated project budget. They can use a sliding scale to enter, find calls that are within a certain range for the project budget. They can also now sort by entry fee, sort the listings high to low or low to high of the entry fees. They can also sort the list of deadlines earliest or deadlines latest. They can now filter by multiple states at once. So before they were only able to choose one state at a time and see all the calls within that state. Now they can check off as many states as they want to see opportunities within their area. And along with that, they can now filter by geographic region. So we have the Southeast, Northeast, Midwest, Southwest, and Northwest. They can just choose which region they want to look at calls for, and they'll pull up those opportunities. They can also now search by keywords in the short description of the call. So let me head back to the call editor here. As you all know, the short description is one of the fields that you can enter in info about your call. So this is where you will briefly describe details, and sorry not to keep switching pages, but on this call listing details here, this is that short description where it's listed. So, this information is key items that they'll need to know in order to then view the more detailed description in that long description. Now, with our new filter options, they can search by any of the words in the short description. So no longer do you have to make sure all of your keywords are in your call name or your organization name, as those were previously keywords. But now artists can search for any keywords that are in that short description and more easily access or locate your call. And then finally, we also added the view calls and calendar view option to the call listing page. So instead of viewing this full list here, they can, I believe it's under deadline month, they can go to the calendar and view the calendar of upcoming deadlines. Now we'll talk about what we have in store to implement to CaFÉ next. So for artists, we have a new feature coming where instead of having to upload the full video or audio file, if an artist is uploading, a video or audio art piece, they can instead choose to upload a link of the video online. So like a YouTube link, Vimeo link, they'll always have the option to add the file itself. But because some larger videos are often difficult to add, this would be an easier option to be able to link to the video already online. And hopefully this would then become embedded, the video itself using that link would become embedded in the application and the scorecard for administrators and jurors to see. So they don't necessarily have to go to that link, but they can, with any luck that things go our way, they'll be able to just view the video from there. So we hope that, kind of makes collecting video and audio files a lot easier. Then speaking of jurors, we also have a update in the works to update the interface of the juror side. So as hopefully everyone knows, or unless you're new here, you might not know, we recently updated the interface of the administrator side of CaFÉ last summer. And so that updated, some of the look and design, but also some of the features. And we're going to be doing the same thing for the juror side. Right now, the juror side looks as it did before. So we hope to update that soon. It's not going to change anything really about the juror process. It's just going to make it look like it looks like for the admins. And like I mentioned before, that someone already expected or asked about, we do hope to add those conditional logic questions to the application editor. So these would be questions where you could reveal an answer or an additional question if that artist chooses a particular answer from a question. So for example, do you have any installation requirements for your piece? If the artist answers yes, another question box could then appear to ask them to elaborate on those installation requirements. So conditional logic is pretty standard for applications, anywhere. So we'd love to be able to roll this feature out on CaFÉ too. Some other changes or fixes we like to implement are allowing administrators to bulk export application files. So anything that is collected when you set up a file upload question on your application, like resumes or references or anything like that, where they upload a file, instead of having to go into each application individually and downloading those files one by one, we want to build a tool where you could just click one thing and export all of those files at once. Another thing we'd like to add is the full screen artwork view for jurors and possibly also admins, with the possibility for a zoom in and out feature, in addition to being able to enlarge the view of the artwork image. When you're reviewing them or scoring them, you could make it full screen and then zoom in and out to the artwork. And then finally, we hope to add a bulk upload option for artists' work samples. So instead of having to upload work samples one by one, artists could upload multiple at the same time. Like I said, these are all upcoming new features that we have planned for and we are starting to work out and implement. And we have an entire list of, other items that we want to be able to add to CaFÉ that we've taken from your feedback and suggestions, and that they're on our roadmap for future additions to the site. Some are short-term, some are long-term. And while we can't always guarantee when these features will be added, we always want to be transparent about what's being considered and planned so that you know what to expect and so that you know how much we actually do consider your suggestions and ideas. We have a question in the chat. Is there a way to build a multiple choice segment into an application? Yes, there is. In between our submitted questions here, I'll just go ahead and briefly show you this. In the events management page in our call editor, this is something you can do in all applications. You'll go to the application editor tab, and under custom form questions here, this is where you build out any questions you have for your specific application. So we have different question types, and one of them is multiple choice. So under type, you can choose the two multiple choice. Actually, there's three of them. Checkbox, radio button, and drop-down list all give you the option to build out multiple choices so that artists can select the answer that applies to them. Checkbox essentially means, every answer option becomes select all that apply, essentially. They can select as many that they want. Radio button is they can only choose one of those. And then same thing for drop-down list, except a drop-down list means it's in a format kind of like we're looking here. And a question about receiving the Tuesday emails as an admin. That's a good point. Only artists can receive this email. So I would just recommend creating a free artist account. Not only does this allow you to opt into this, it's those notification settings, opportunity notifications. This is the artist sign up page. I recommend doing this for getting those emails and for just having a CaFÉ account to be able to see what it looks like to an artist. So you can even, you don't necessarily have to apply to your own calls, but you can at least view those calls as an artist. So feel free to just sign up with a free account as an artist, and then you can get those emails from us. This does conclude our webinar for our Q&A with CaFÉ. I hope some of your questions have been answered or that you've learned something new. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to join our next webinar next month.